publishing opportunities and avoiding predatory publishers session. I just want to thank you for being here, and of course give a big thank you to Hillary for the massive amount of work that's gone into organizing this conference for us all to enjoy. So our agenda, very straightforward. I'm hoping to deliver exactly what you read in the session description. So part one, we'll sort of look at just some freely available tools to help you identify publishing opportunities. Not particularly deep dives, but I want to survey a few tools so you can have those at the ready to use. And then part two, we'll sort of talk about predatory publishers, what they are, how to avoid them. As Hillary mentioned, the chat is disabled right now just because there's a lot of you and one of me. My plan, as time allows, is I will turn on the chat after sort of part one, see if there's any quick questions I can answer there, and then I'll turn it on again at the end after part two. If we're short on time and can't do a lot of chat questions, I will, of course, put all my contact information up, and you're welcome to reach out with any clarifying or other questions you might have. And also, my last bit of housekeeping is just a reminder that there's a session handout in the attendee hub. So, I'm going to show you lots of resources and suggest resources today. And those names and links out to everything are going to be in that handout. So, don't feel like you have to scribble quickly. We're going to make sure we get all of this information available to you in addition to the recording of the session. Okay, that's all my housekeeping. So I want to, in the interest of maximizing our time, I'm going to jump right in to talk about some of these publishing tools. All right. First on the agenda, I see these go by a lot of names. I've seen text analyzers, I've seen journal suggesters. I was just doing a quick search last week and see them called journal finders. Regardless of the moniker, these are tools that are growing in popularity that are meant basically to function so you could copy and paste some key details of the article you're working on over into them. They usually want something like a title and abstract, and then they're going to spit out recommendations of journals that are likely a good fit for your article. Most of them you'll see are offered by specific publishers, right? I'm going to show you Springer's, but a lot of major publishers have these tools. So I know Wiley and Elsevier and Taylor and Francis and some of those big names have these tools. There's a few that also search across platforms, and the reason I bullet this and wanted to remind myself to talk about that with you is just, of course, keep in mind when you're using the publisher's tool, they're only going to suggest journals that they publish. So you might want to, look through a few publishers' tools, a combination of tools, so you're getting, a good breadth of what's available. And I think the easiest way to talk about these is just to jump over and demo one in action so I can sort of call out the features and the ways you might want to take advantage of them. So I'll minimize those slides there. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing this is just Springer's Journal Suggester, and I will tell you from what I've seen, almost all of these are identical platforms. I think they all use the same technology. So it'll be pretty straightforward, sort of publisher to publisher. And really, they're giving you some details at the top. In Springer's case, they'll tell you it looks through about 2,500 of their journals. And in this case, they just want me to copy over. They say manuscript, title, and text. I'm going to bring over a title and an abstract just for our example. What I did is I went into a Springer article that's already published and pulled a title and abstract because I wanted to see if it would recommend the actual journal that it was published in. So that's where I got this data. So there I've just, copy and pasted some plain text over. A lot of them will give you this functionality, so I could specify my subject area if I want to drill down a little bit further. If you want to get really granular, just so I've shown you, some of these tools will let you really specify, only show me ones, that will respond with a decision in 60 days, or only show me ones with a certain acceptance rate. I'm not going to get that particular now, but wanted you to see the functionalities there. Otherwise, I've got my title and my abstract in, so I'm just going to say, okay, suggest some journals for me to publish in. It will think for a second, and then you can see it spit out this list. So I'm still all in the same interface, but now down below I've got this list of journals that Springer thinks might be a good match based on what it can see in my title and my abstract. And again, this is obviously nice. There's so many journals out there nowadays. How do I know what exists and what might be a good fit. This is taking some of that work out for me. They're going to give us a snapshot of details just off the bat, things like if there's an impact factor, how many days till the first decision on average, right? So, how long could I expect to wait before I hear back? And then, the percentage acceptance rate. So how many articles are, actually published versus those submitted. So that's, of course, just a little preview. In their case, I certainly recommend connecting to the journal. Here we can get a bit more detail. So of course, very important, we want to come read the aim and scope. This is a great way to know if their algorithm worked. Does the aim and scope sound like it's a good match for the article that you want to publish in that journal? The other thing I want to call out here, and I'm hoping you can keep this in the back of your mind because we're going to circle back to this when we talk about predatory publishers, is just where they tell you indexed by. When they're saying where the journal's indexed, that's just where it's made discoverable. What services sort of make the journal content viewable to other researchers? And of course, in my librarian brain, this is really important because if you're doing all this hard work on this article, you want to publish somewhere where it's going to, ideally be seen by others. So in this case, this is a long, long list, but it should be some places, I recognize. I know Social Science Citation Index, that's a database, Google Scholar, right? I see these big aggregators like EBSCO and ProQuest. So suffice to say, I can tell this journal, is covered in a lot of spots. So most researchers, especially with subscription library access, should be able to find the content there. So I know my article is going to be pretty visible. Just in case you saw it down below, we're going to circle back to this in more detail, but I don't want anyone to panic if they see something like publication charge. Most of the time, traditional publishers, there's not a fee to publish, but in the cases where folks choose to publish their articles open access, and we're going to get into that a bunch more in just a little bit, but publishers will often charge a fee if you want to publish open access. So if you see a publication charge, I wouldn't panic right off the bat. I would go to the journal's website to learn more about their structure and to see, in what cases they charge a fee. It's not, something writ large that just happens all the time. And then, of course, that's my segue to say, for your full due diligence, my last step, I love using these suggesters to get ideas, journals I might want to consider. But of course, the best thing to do when I narrow it down to a few is really go to their websites. One, of course, because I can see all that granular, author submission guidelines, which is where I get all the details about their process. And then, of course, once I'm here, I can look at least at titles and abstracts of other articles published in the journal. And I think that's a really helpful way, if I'm trying to decide between 2 or 3 journals where I'm submitting an article, I can go get that preview of the other content they tend to publish and try to visualize, am I a good fit, amongst sort of their larger body of publications. So I always recommend take that extra step, do a little bit of that digging. I think it could help you just make an informed decision there. That, is these suggester tools in a nutshell. Like I said, they all function in a really similar way, so I won't, belabor and do a deep dive. Again, I just showed you Springer's. I have a few of them linked in the handout. If you're trying to find others, honestly, I don't usually recommend Googling, but in this case for information, if you Google something like Journal Suggester or Journal Finder, that's a really easy way where you can bring back, like I said, ones from other providers like Wiley and Elsevier and others. So that's sort of the lingo you'd be using to look for and pull back ones from other places. Okay, so let me sort of move in now to another tool or type of tool that you might be able to use here. And this is journal ranking websites. If you're familiar with journal rankings, or you might be familiar with that lingo, impact factor, which gets assigned to various journals, that's a journal ranking site. What they're doing is making this really complicated calculation about a journal's impact or its rank based on some citation metrics. And I'm going to try to do my best to walk the line between giving you some information, but not getting us, laden down with technical details. But generally, these journal ranking sites, and I'll show you this, what they're doing is they're taking, historical data about, on average, how many times articles in certain journals are published. It's more complicated than that, but that's a general sense. And then they're saying, okay, well, if an article in this journal is cited more than others, this journal has a higher impact because it's being cited and talked about more frequently. That's sort of a distilled down version of what's happening on these sites. You can, impact factor aside, which is a whole sort of other bucket of content we could talk about, not at length today. What I like about these sites is they can actually just serve as really great directories of journals by subject. So again, I think part of the challenge now is there's so many publications out there. How can we even find the ones that exist in our field so that we know what to choose from and where to publish? And so these rankings are really only meaningful when they're compared within a subject. So they have to organize their content by subject. So for me, it makes it really easy to go click on a subject, and then I just get a list of journals in that field. So, however much depth you want to go into and how you want to use them, I think they still provide really excellent leads when I'm trying to figure out where to publish. I'm going to show you two. The one I'll focus on in a little more depth here is this first one from Cymago, which is just a group of institutions. The reason I like to show this one, it's freely available on the web, so regardless of your access to anything, you can use it. And the other reason is because it pulls its data from Scopus, and I promise I'm not trying to throw out nonsense words here. Scopus is data from a company called Elsevier, and the long story short is just I know this is pretty reliable data, so I know they're pulling from a place that I can trust as far as their citation counts and things go, so that's why I like to show this tool. And then I'll just briefly show you Google Scholar has a really pared down version of this, so that's another free spot you can go check out. And last mention before I go show them to you is just the unfortunate reality with predatory publishers, which we'll talk about shortly, is predatory publishers usually can't get their journals into these credible ranking sites since they're not really legitimate entities. And what is born out of that now is we see some now fake journal ranking sites, right? We sort of have this snowball effect. So that's why I sort of point out, see if you can figure out where their data is coming from if you just randomly find a journal ranking site online. I'm showing you these two because I have a little bit better sense that they're reliable. Okay, so I'll stop talking about them and show them to you. First, I just wanted to show you more as entertainment value. This is the equation that Cymago uses to calculate their rankings. So when I say complex, it's a bit of an understatement, and that's why I'm not trying to sort of belabor that aspect in our talk. But if you're interested in their precise measurements and how they're ranking all these journals, they, openly link to this on the site, and you can certainly read through their documentation and learn more. For us, though, if we're using this more like a directory of journals, here I am. SJR is just the abbreviation for Cymago Journal Rank, and I'm going to click on journal rankings specifically. That's what we're interested in, so I can see my lists of journals. Now, when you first land on their homepage, they're just going to list everything, and this won't have a lot of meaning to you. Like I said, these ranks, they don't really mean anything when you compare across subjects, since there's different levels of publishing activity in different subjects. So when you land here, you want to use these drop-down menus to just better target sort of the field that you're working in and that you're after. So I could say, okay, great, here's all the subject areas, right? This is comprehensive. You can look through this. I'll just click on social sciences right now. And then once you've chosen your larger subject area, you'll have a list of categories associated with that subject area. So you can drill down and get a little bit more specific. And again, these will change depending on the larger category you chose. So for me, here I am in a digital library. I'll choose e-learning for now. And now that I've made those selections, right, I have this list over here on the left, all of journals that at least in some regard, have publishing activities related to that subject of e-learning. So for me, it's nice because, okay, I've gotten into the right wheelhouse, which is what I'm after. I will call out a few things on this page because I know it looks really overwhelming with all these numbers, but I'm not going to go into depth talking about those. But these are all numbers related to, like I said, the calculation with citations and how many they get over a certain period of time. And really what I just want to show you is when you're on the site, if you hover over these columns, it'll be small right now on your screen. They will give you the exact definition of what the number means in the column. So once you spend a little time, if you want to, looking at that data, you'll be able to see how they define and measure everything there. For me, if I was using it, more as a directory, I'd be curious to look at these titles, see if anything, appears to be a good match. And then if you make a selection, they're going to give you a little bit more detail. So of course, they'll give us the scope note so I can get a preview of what the journal tends to focus its publishing efforts on. I also like to call out, I think it's easy to miss, but you'll see up here there's something that says subject area and category. This is just showing me the different pathways in Simago that I could have taken to land on this journal. And it gives me a little more context, at least I find it helpful. So we came through in social sciences and e-learning, but I could see if I had chosen education, it would have come up. And it also would have come up if I'd gone in through computer science and chosen applications. And sometimes that's helpful because I might choose a journal and feel like the subject categories start to feel really loosely related to my topic. And I might say, let me go, peruse some other ones to see what's a good fit or whatever it might be. So I think those can just add some richness to the context, but you have to know what you're looking at and know to look for them over there. Lastly, just like in the journal suggesters, Simago, it'll still jump you out straight to the journal site, which is where I could get all, the aim and scope and author instructions and all those details and peruse other content. And because I think this will come up as a question since they advertise this so large over here, this H index. I'm going to do my best to give a clear definition because this is a calculation that they make. So if you see H index assigned to a journal, the calculation is the number of articles, H, which have been cited at least H number of times in whatever the reporting period is. So Simago uses 3 years of data. So the other way I would express that is to say, in interactive learning environments in the past 3 years, 38 articles have received at least 38 citations. And they're always just sort of using the highest number where that intersection occurs. So I don't want to get us too in the weeds there. I just want to point it out because in all of the ranking tools you see, you're going to see that thing that says H index. And that's what it's trying to describe. Last thing I'll point out on this page is if you scroll down below this initial content for inquiring minds, if you're interested, they just have a ton more granular data, sort of tracking citations in articles published in the journal. So I won't go into that in any level of detail, but I just want to make sure you've seen that if you keep scrolling, they really do collect a lot of information in one place to make available to you. Okay. I'm going to really quickly show you Google Scholar's version because it's fast and pared down. And then what I'll do is pause, see if you have any questions to put in chat just about some of these free tools. Then we'll forge ahead and talk predatory publishers. Google Scholar's journal rankings, like I said, they're really pared down, but it's a sort of quick way you can get in at some of this content. If you're on the Google Scholar homepage, look up in the left where you can get to the menu, and you'll see an option that says metrics. So when we choose metrics, again, see, this is very pared down, but it functions similarly to Simago. So I could say, okay, here's a category of publication, here's a subcategory, and then they're going to do just sort of the 20 highest ranked journals. They also use that H index calculation. So these aren't links or anything, I'd have to copy and paste the title and go find the journal site. But another quick entry I could use to get in. I'll disclaim to you just so, I've said it that down at the very bottom of the page, it might be cut off for you. They just say that all of this is run through a computer program, so I don't get a lot of information about where they're sourcing the data. But again, one of many tools, sort of quick and easy for you to use to see journals in a field or journals ranked highly in a field when you're choosing where to publish. So I'm gonna turn on the chat function just for a couple minutes because I want to make sure to have time to talk predatory publishers. But if you have any quick questions, let me look at those. Okay, here's a good question. Can you submit to multiple journals at the same time, or do you need rejection before submitting to another? Thank you for asking that question. It's a good one. In most cases, you will submit to journals one at a time. And if I can get back to it, if not, no worries. Generally, when you go to the journal site, like I was showing you, and they have all of the author submission guidelines, we'll see if I can get to this one or not. In the author submission guidelines, if they have the sort of ethics and disclosure section, they will make it very explicit for you that you're agreeing that this is a unique article you are submitting just to them. So the general best practice is you would choose, your one best spot and submit and wait for a decision before you then submit it elsewhere. They don't want you to sort of, for lack of a better word, peddle an article to more than one spot before receiving a decision. So general best practice guidelines would be submit one place, await decision before you choose sort of to do another, but don't submit same work simultaneously multiple places. Let's see, our journal self-cite's a good thing or an important thing. I think you're asking about citing your own work in another work, but I'm not sure if I am interpreting your question correctly, Cliff. Is that what you're asking? You can put the clarification in the chat box if you want. Oh, I see. Like if you're asking, is it good to have citations to other works in that journal when you choose to submit to that journal, if it gives you like a leg up, or, if they'll notice that you're also citing their content. I can't speak directly to how close attention the peer reviewers and the editors will pay to that. So I don't know. It could be case by case basis, or it could be something in most cases, the journals, you can see who the editors are. It could be something you could also check in with them about directly. I'm not sure that writ large, how much of a factor that would play, or if they advertise, if they take that into account or not. But good question and good consideration and food for thought. Okay, I'm just turning off the chat box now so we can switch gears and keep forging ahead. I want to make sure to squeeze this all in time, and talk a little bit about part two, which is, predatory publishers. For lack of a better word, I said illegitimate here. Some people say, not credible or fake publishers, but these are basically folks who are taking advantage of that open access publishing model for their own profit. So the risk there for academics, seeking to publish, of course, is that could damage your reputation. It could make your work hard to find because they aren't indexed in a lot of places, like I was referring to earlier. Or it could make it really hard to publish that work elsewhere. Even if you mistakenly publish with a predatory publisher, they could charge you a fee to retract, or other journals could say, that work's already published somewhere, we don't want to publish it again. And suffice to say, that could be stress, that could be lost money on your end. So being aware that these publishers are out there, and hopefully by giving you some tips about how to avoid them, you can just sort of avoid that situation altogether. Just a little bit more for context, since we're talking about open access, and this is what predatory publishers are sort of using to sneak in the door. Open access publishing is just when you say, I'm going to publish my article, but I want it to be, freely and widely available to all. So that means you'd publish under this open access model. And as long as someone had a way to find out that the work existed, they would be able to go to the publisher's website and access the full text. without any cost. So, you know, great in terms of sort of propelling research forward and free access to information. But what you know, credible or legit publishers will do, as we saw a little bit earlier, is they will often levy a charge to authors if you want to publish that way. And this is a, you know, moral ethical debate for another time, but they're saying, well, we think we're going to lose revenue because you're just making your article freely available. So you can publish open access, but we want you to pay us a fee. And that's the model these predatory publishers are taking advantage of, right? They're saying, sure, we'll publish your article for you. We'll make it freely available, but you know, you just have to pay us $900 or whatever it might be. And that's really tempting, you know, if you're newly graduated, trying to get your work out there, if you're in some sort of publish or perish environment, right, and you're eager to sort of get a certain number of publications, it looks really enticing to just quickly be able to, you know, publish. But of course, the downside is, you know, they don't really have a peer review process. There's no quality vetting. They aren't indexed anywhere, so the work's not really findable. But you know, they've been able to levy that fee. So that said, how can we spot them? You know, predatory publishing is on the rise, so I'm just going to call out some main features, and then what I'm going to do is show you a sample email from a predatory publisher and how I would sort of sleuth it to figure out what was going on. I keep saying publishers, but often what you're going to see first is you might be approached by a certain journal. So step one, if you can, who's the actual publisher behind the journal? I'll show you some tips for spotting them. There's lots and lots of resources in the handout and in the guide that you have access to from the session to help you with this, but I'd want to do a little work to figure out who is this publisher and can I figure out anything about their editorial process. A lot of times they say they're peer review, and some deeper digging, I can find lots of posts from other academics that sort of suggest otherwise. Something really, really common is receiving email solicitations inviting you to publish. This should give you pause, of course, you know, when you see acceptance rates for journals, like we saw in that results list earlier, they tend to, you know, publish just a fraction of the submissions they receive and generally don't need to solicit individuals to submit journal articles. You know, we can always think of exceptions to a rule. You know, maybe there's a special issue and they're doing a call for papers or something, but sort of day to day, it's not common practice for publishers to reach out to individuals or journals to reach out to individuals. You know, once you've received the email or you can sort of find the publisher or the journal's website, there's some other things you can look for. Again, this is just, you know, a few, but you're often going to see things like awkward language in the message or on the site. When I'm on the site particularly, I'll try to see who is on the editorial board. If I start sort of Googling names and affiliations, a lot of times they don't hold up. I can't find the person, or the person's real, but you contact them and they've never heard of the journal. And then, as I was talking about earlier, what can you tell about where the journal is actually indexed? You know, are they working, you know, are they findable by those big aggregators like ProQuest and EBSCO, or are they saying they're indexed places you've never heard of, right? So again, a few of many considerations you can take. I thought what would be helpful is one of our faculty members kindly gave me permission to use one of the solicitation emails she received so that I could call out for you some of those common things and use that as a base to walk through some steps you could follow to sort of track down what's going on. So we'll take a look at that email and then I'll hop out and just show you some resources you could use to try to avoid these publishers. Now, some of this text might be small. It's okay. I'll read anything that's highlighted, but the few things I wanted to call out are, first, if you look up here in the top left corner where I've got this arrow, Social Sciences, that's the name of the journal. And it's very common for these predatory publishers for the journals to have very, very vague or common names like Social Sciences. Again, credible publishers, some of their journals have common names too. This is just one of many clues I'd be looking at, right? So I'm saying, okay, this journal is called Social Sciences. I also noticed they say publish the paper in 90 days. Exceptionally fast turnaround time, right? We saw in some cases you don't hear a first decision for 70 days. So a start to finish publication in 90 days to me sounds really fast. The other thing I've called out here, I'm familiar with Science PG, but okay, the journal Social Sciences, if I saw, like a logo or mention of another entity, this is the actual publisher behind them, Science Publishing Group. So sometimes you can, pick up those little clues in the email. They fortunately gave me their journal website, so it was really easy for me to go track that down, but sometimes it feels a little difficult to figure out who the publisher is. Now, I won't read this all to you. This highlighting was just me calling out a few of what I considered sort of the awkwardly worded sentences here. And obviously, we're all guilty of sometimes sending an awkwardly worded email in haste, and that certainly doesn't mean something's nefarious. For me, this is, should be an email from a professional publisher, with editors. And so I would expect, it to really be sort of thoughtfully done and edited, since that's sort of their whole reputation is publishing. And that's why some of the awkward wording would give me pause. And you can see here, some of these call outs, the word learnt, I don't see commonly. Then I see like, we will feel honored. It is privileged for us. Just the turn of phrase isn't precisely how I would expect to find it. I won't read this whole sentence to you, but this whole sentence, while I can understand what it's saying, it's not worded in the way that I would expect. I have to think about what they're trying to get at. So that for me, I said, okay, we've got a broad journal name, this Science PG publisher, and an email that sounds a bit awkwardly worded. It's cut off, but the email is just signed associate editor. So there's not a name, there's just a position title. And so I found that, a little bit odd as well. So when this one was forwarded to me, I'll show you in brief a few steps I followed that you could replicate if you're trying to sort of track something down and figure out if it's a good place to publish. So the first thing I did is I went to this site called the Directory of Open Access Journals, the DOAJ. One, it's just a nice resource if you're looking for open access works, but folks have to apply to be members. So you can't just say, I'm an open access publication, I'll be included in the DOAJ. They actually have an application process because they say that they offer high quality open access peer review content. So they want to vet you to make sure that your standards are in line with their standards before they include you in this database. So that means it's pretty likely that a predatory publisher shouldn't be able to get their content in here because they are likely not going to make it through that application process. So let me zoom in here a little bit. I landed here. I said, okay, I'm going to search for publishers and I'm going to look for Science Publishing Group. I looked, I found no results. Just so you know, of course, in my due diligence, I did Science PG. I did all those little sort of different ways to express them, and I couldn't find them here. So that didn't bode particularly well. If you can't find the publisher, this is a nice resource because you can also just search for journal titles. So I could say, okay, this journal's called Social Sciences. This is, of course, going to bring back results. Those words are pretty common to find in journal titles. But for me, I'm not going to look through all of these with you, but I did scroll through and I was able to find one journal with the name Social Sciences, but it's a different publisher. I jumped out to their website because they'll link to their website and it was different than the website in the email. So I knew, this wasn't a match. I knew this was from a different entity, not from Science PG. So I said, okay, confirmed. As far as I can tell, they're not in here. The other thing I did since they gave it to me is I went ahead and went and looked at their website because I wanted to get some more details. At first glance, it looks pretty normal. I had a little bit of pause because they're really advertising, hey, just come be a lead guest editor, which I don't often see as something that just anyone can apply to do. But I said, okay. For me, as I mentioned earlier, I went and looked at their editorial board and their peer reviewers, right? I started doing some web searching for people's names and affiliations to see if I could find confirmation they existed, which had mixed results at best. When I viewed the editorial board, I'll just show you, there were 177 members, which I found astronomical. And they're still inviting more to join. So that I did not feel great about. On the About page, this is where they're going to give you that indexing information, right? This is where the journal's indexed. And when we looked at the other one, I'm hoping you recognized some of the entities in the list. There were EBSCO, ProQuest, right? Social Sciences Citation Index. These, I only recognize 2, and neither of those 2 does any quality vetting. So, it's not to say that these aren't necessarily trustworthy sources. They're not ones I'm familiar with. The 2 you might be familiar with, which are the ones I noticed, were WorldCat and Crossref. So WorldCat is just a catalog. So if these journals have ISSN numbers, standard numbers, their content can be in here because they aren't vetting quality. They're just saying these publications exist, right? That's why they're technically in WorldCat. Similarly, Crossref, if they're assigning DOI numbers to journal articles, they'll be findable there. There's no sort of quality control. Those are just places where if they've been assigned this standard number, it will show up. So want to call those out because that's sort of, I commonly see these with predatory publishers, and I think it's a little misleading. Okay, last thing in the interest of time is I wanted to see how they described their processing charges, because if it's a predatory publisher, they are first and foremost trying to get you to pay them to publish your article. And some of this is great. It's good to be transparent. I'll show you the thing that at least caught my eye was when I scrolled down, this sort of advertisement of payment options. I don't see this commonly from other publishers. It's not, they still kind of treat it taboo. They're not just out there saying, look at all the ways you could pay your fee. So that to me, again, just felt more like an ad than anything else. So in the interest of time, I won't, there's lots of other things I could call out to you, but I took those details, not finding it in the DOAJ, looking at the email. The last thing I did was just some web searches, and I found just tons and tons of blog posts from other academics and from librarians about their experience with them, which confirmed to me, I said, I don't think this is credible. I wouldn't publish here. And that's how I sort of stacked all my evidence up. So what are some resources you can use? There's a lot of great ones out there. This first one I mentioned is a website called Think, Check, Submit. It's very straightforward. What I like about it, though, this sort of check component in their name, they have a nice checklist you can use just with prompting questions, and they'll remind you of things. It'll say, oh, did you check the directory of open access journals? Did you check this other site that lists credible publishers? They just give you some prompting questions so you don't have to, hold all of this in your brain, but you can go through and sort of treat one by one to know you've done your due diligence. So I think it's a nice resource. You'll find linked in the handout, Fielding Our Library. We have a library guide about publishing, both publishing and avoiding predatory publishers. And we've got links out to just tons and tons of resources and examples. So you'll see other emails there, video help content, lots and lots of granular detail that I didn't go into now. And then the Committee on Publication Ethics, if you haven't heard of them or checked out their website, they're on publication ethics. So they are obviously sort of highly invested and interesting in what's going on with this predatory publishing field. They've got some great resources, and I'll actually say they have really excellent resources beyond just predatory publishers. So that great question in the chat earlier about, is it okay to submit my article to more than one place at a time? What about citing other journals or self-citing and things like that? They have great resources on a number of those types of topics. I've learned a lot there and often find great content when I'm trying to track down an answer. And lastly, I would encourage you, feel free to sleuth. This is one of those times I would say, go to Googling web searches and sort of checking around with colleagues can really reveal a lot, because it's more and more common for folks to have experience with predatory publishers. So there's a lot of sort of crowdsourced knowledge out there that you can really glean some good answers. Okay, saving just enough time. I'm going to turn the chat back on. I know that was rapid fire, but just in case you've got some chat questions, I certainly want to look at those. While I'm letting chat questions come in, of course, here is my contact information. This was, like I said, a really brief, quick jump into this. So if you have questions, I welcome you to send those. Also, if you've had experiences or want to share any of your own knowledge for my own edification, I would love to hear those. So please feel free to send them. Let's see, there's a question about where we find the handouts. So it should be in the attendee hub in the section affiliated with this meeting. If you don't see it there, please feel free to email me. I have a link to the handout, so I'm certainly glad to send it to you as well. I also see a question about if it's common to receive email invitations to publish after conference presentations. You know, that's a great question. That if you presented at a conference and maybe it's a professional association, you know, like APA, and then you get follow-up from them about publication directly, I wouldn't be as sort of wary of that. If I did a conference presentation but then just started receiving email solicitations like the one example I showed you, I would be wary of that, because they might have found out, you know, your name and your contact information from the conference. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all. I wish it was. That these folks are just so good at sort of digging people out and finding ways to contact them. The other thing I'll say, the conference presentation question reminds me, is think, check, submit, and some of those resources also help you sort of know what might be a bogus sort of conference presentation or otherwise, since like I said, there's all that trickle down. So thank you for asking about conferences. That's a good question. Let me check here. I see I have about 30 seconds left. Oh, good. Okay, we see the handouts there. Excellent. All right, well, that was fast. I want to thank you all again for attending. And I'm sorry I didn't get to plug our alumni library better with my time.
That's okay. I think maybe we need to have another session, a longer session with you. I'm seeing some nods. Yes. The handouts are available on the attendee hub. If you click back into the session on the attendee hub, then it'll go back to the event page. Plus, great news is that we recorded this, so you can go back and listen to this again. And these videos will be available on demand through April 15th, so you can watch Abby over and over and over again. All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Great to see you. Next session is in about 15 minutes if you want to join us for the next one. Abby, thank you. As always, you are the best.
Thank you. Everyone. Thank you all. Take care.